been in 1992. Construction finally began in 2002. Israel's justification is that it protects the country from suicide bombers. Palestinians say it's reduced the West Bank to a prison and excluded farmers from their land. Today, a truck was used to pull down a 6-meter-high section of the barrier. City of Ramallah. She told me more about the incident.
Well, this was a group of activists who, as you say, were trying to make a hole in the barrier today to mark the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. They said that this was a symbolic reenactment of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and that they hope that there can be eventually an end to the occupation, as they say here in this part of the world.
So all they did manage to do was just take a chunk out of the barrier?
A chunk, a sort of a section of the barrier where there was a concrete block, 8 meters, they say, reinforced concrete. They pulled out and opened a passage in what they call a strategic or symbolic location. And this was at the Columbia checkpoint, which is close to the crossing between Ramallah in the West Bank and to East Jerusalem.
I understand not the first time that this has happened.
No, there have been a couple of other incidents earlier, in fact just early on Friday in Lean, where protesters managed as well to topple another piece of concrete slab in the area of the wall.
Very briefly, any Israeli reaction?
Israeli troops fired tear gas at the crowd today. Some of them threw stones back, but it hasn't been sort of the huge reaction that one might have seen perhaps at other points. But there was some tear gas fired today.
That's the BBC's Bethany Bell in Ramallah. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, it also accelerated political change outside Europe. During the Cold War, Africa became a continent on which corrupt socialist dictators were armed by Moscow. Washington backed opponents of communism and tolerated their human rights abuses. Those liberation movements fighting to end colonial rule, and in the case of South Africa, apartheid, were funded by Eastern Europe, while America supplied rebels with weapons if they took a pro-Western line. But with the fall of the wall and the collapse of communism, new political orders emerged in Africa, and with them talk of democracy and multi-party elections. I've been talking to two veteran African political commentators, Kenyan Ali Mazrui, director of the Institute of Global Cultural Studies at the State University of New York, and South African William Gumede, author of Thabo Mbeki and the Battle for the Soul of the ANC. How did he react when the wall came down 20 years ago?
I didn't believe it. You know, the context of South Africa in the late 1980s, I thought it was all propaganda, apartheid propaganda, because, you know, for us in South Africa and the South African liberation struggle, the East Bloc represented us, you know, the good and the right people, and, you know, the West was seen as capitalistic, opposed to our struggle. So in the beginning, I remember the day when it happened, when we heard about it. It took a couple of days, really, before it sank in there.
So you were actually quite apprehensive that as part of a liberation movement in South Africa, that you were going to lose crucial support from Eastern Europe?
Absolutely. You know, for the liberation movements of Southern Africa, you know, the 1980s, you know, they got the massive support